Hello chess friends and welcome to the Chess channel and welcome back to the Computer Rapid Chess Championship in 2021. We're now in the super final between Stockfish against Lila C0, and as I'm recording this video, the result is plus 47 for the Stockfish engine, which means now that the Stockfish engine is the winner of the Computer Rapid Chess Championship in 2021, because these two engines have to play, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 more games. So it's of course something that Lila C0 cannot catch up anymore, and of course Stockfish is the winner of a new super event. So whatever they play, we have seen recently this TC competitions, we have seen this Blitz Bullet Chess Championships, we have seen the Rapid Chess Championship. Now whatever they play, the Stockfish engine is so dominant. It's really pure domination now by the Stockfish engine, and it's almost like this domination played by AlphaZero back in 2017-2018 when AlphaZero brutalized Stockfish, but it was a different Stockfish. I would love to see now, maybe now the Stockfish 14, maybe in the future we'll see also the Stockfish 15, maybe against AlphaZero. This will be a brilliant chess game. When we watch now these competitions, it's sometimes boring to watch maybe one engine so dominant through the whole tournament stage, but as I said, I would love to see maybe now AlphaZero against Stockfish. This will be, I don't know, maybe in a mortal match game between really the best engines that have ever performed in chess. So let's check out now one great game. As I said, these games that I analyze, of course, on my YouTube chess channel, we can use in order to improve our skills in particular openings, in particular sidelines of openings. And sometimes when I watch some Stockfish games, I try some systems, I try some ideas that Stockfish is playing against particular openings, especially when Stockfish is playing as white. And I won many games, really. Maybe they were not so important games, but I won many blitz games, bullet games, in which I applied some of the systems. And for those who have problems maybe to play against the Scheveningen system, here with the white pieces, I think you can use really this approach of Stockfish in the Keres system. It's really wild system that Stockfish plays now, and Stockfish really brutalized Lila C0 again with brilliant tactical and strategical play. Be prepared. As I said, if you have problems to beat the Scheveningen Sicilian, this is a perfect setup for you. So here E4 played by Stockfish, Lila C0 responsible C5, the Sicilian, knight to F3. We have now E6, which is now the so-called French Sicilian. After move D4, C takes D4, knight to D4, knight to F6, and knight to C3. We have now the Scheveningen system with the move D6. This is the flexible system, which allows now here black to go into neither structures with the move E5 and A6, and it allows, it allows also here black to maybe break through here and simplify the position with a clear D5 move. So here in the continuation, we have now G4, which is now the Keres Attack. As I said, the knight on F6 here is a key defender, so that's why we want to kick it away. Many times black defense like this, so this was still prearranged with the move H6. Now we have H4 with the threat to play the move G5, but G5 immediately is not possible. You have to play still bishop to G2 because of this tactical problems on the H file, because if you play G5 too early, then H takes G5, then you cannot take H takes G5 because your rook is hanging. So that's why you have to here lock your rook with the move bishop to G2. You have to protect your rook on the H file. So here in the continuation, we have bishop to E7. Now comes this move bishop to G2, protecting the rook. We have now G6, and now comes G5. And okay, after H takes G5, you have now a choice. You can play H takes G5 and bishop to G5. In my opinion, already a surprise here, because Stockfish played bishop to G5. Here we can notice that this is an isolated pawn, but actually when we think about it harder, it's a clear idea, because here in the continuation of the game, it's really hard now for black to castle. If you play H takes G5, okay, then the game becomes a little bit more simplified, I think. Rook takes H1, then we have bishop to H1, the knight retreats, and you have to protect your pawn now. And in continuation, if you try with the move F4, then E5, I think, solves now all of the positional problems here for black. You see the pawn chain is a little bit annoying here to handle, so that's why the best way, of course, to break a pawn chain is to attack it in the center, and the center is F4. So now the pawn chain is split, and every particular pawn now on the king side would be then a weakness. So I think this is a simplified line for black. Black would enjoy now the game, and in the meanwhile, I think the G5 is weak for sure. In the continuation of the game, the G5 pawn will be taken. So as I said, this is not a good continuation. So that's why you have to play bishop to G5 instead of H takes G5. And okay, maybe now the H4 pawn is a little bit isolated, but we can notice now that black has problems to castle. If you castle too early, then in one particular moment, I think bishop to F6 will happen, and then with H5, then the pawn becomes really annoying. With H5, we can even, I think, open the H file somehow, maybe build a queen and rook battery on the H file and deliver in checkmate. So the problem in these types of structures is that the Black's kings has to stay a little bit longer in the center of the board. That's now the main issue, because you see now what Lila C0 will do. Play simply knight to C6, challenging the knight on D4. We have queen to D2, Lila C0 takes, knight takes D4, queen to D4, and now E5. Now we have reached a similar structure like in the Nxd4 Sicilian with the move E5. Here in the continuation you have to escape, and when we watch now invalidate the position, we can notice always in this Nxd4 structure, sometimes these similar structures apply also in the Lasker Pelican Sicilian, where you have this E5 advance, but you have a backward pawn on D6. And I've talked about this pawn structures many times on my channel, also in our strategy videos. Here with the move E5, okay, you have kicked away the queen, but you have now weakness on D6, which is now backward pawn weakness, but we have also a weak square, which is of course the weak square D5. And most of the times what you want to do is get rid of any defender of the D5 square. So it means now we want to get rid of the knight, but we want to get rid of also of the bishop, because these two pieces are the only pieces that can control the D5 square. And that's now, I think, the main strategy. Of course, we want to continue our pressure with queenside castling, and then also with the queen and rook battery on the d-file. So it's obvious what white will do. So when we watch now this position, it's so hard now for black to defend the position. You have to play really like a top engine here in order to defend the position. So that's why I like the Keres attack, because from a human's perspective, it's easy now, I think, to find at least some good moves. Maybe you'll not find the best of moves, but you can really find some decent ideas. But what Stockfish does here is, of course, a different approach to the game. Here, Stockfish will provide, again, some pervert ideas in chess. Here, after move queen to d3, we have now knight to h5, because Lila C0 cannot allow this positional trades of pieces. As we said, here you don't want to lose your knight, you don't want to lose your light for bishop, because these two pieces are controlling the d5 square. Maybe not immediately, you cannot compete with this knight on d5 immediately, but as a long term, you should really stay with your knight and with your light for bishop on the board. So here in the continuation, we have bishop to e3, we have bishop to g4, preventing now here this preventing white here from queenside castling. If you try here, for instance, something like knight to f4 instead of this bishop to g4, then I think white can immediately take bishop to f4, then e takes f4, then queenside castling. And even if you try here to take, it's not so good, because you get now really a stunning tactic. You get the move e5, which in the beginning seems that solves, I think, for the problems of black, but actually it's not so, because you have now two choices. You can play a rook to h1, and then after rook to h1, you see that the threat is to move rook to h8. So you have to, even if you play something like, I don't know, d takes e5, then you get simply rook to h8, and the game is over. You have to then of course cover with the bishop, and then of course we can simply take and deflect the king from the defense of the queen. So even if you try here d takes e5 instead of taking immediately on h1, then again rook to h4, bishop to h4, but now queen to b5. You see how tricky this position can be. Even if you try to cover, then queen to e5, you have to cover again with the queen, and now again similar tactic, queen to h8, you lose the battle simply around the square h8 here. Even if you cover, we can take out this pawn, or we can take, I don't know, maybe this one, then we can of course take then afterwards the bishop on d7, or you can immediately take out the bishop on h4. Whatever happens, it's a pleasant game for us. So that's why I don't think that this move, you see, bishop knight to f4 helps you out. You would love, of course, to cement your knight, but the mobility of this pawn is, again, I think, something that bothers black in the continuation of the game. Even if you try here maybe bishop to h4 to take out this pawn. We'll simply queenside castle again, and here again the d6 is weak. We can occupy the d5. We can play knight to b5. You see the bishop is a little bit loose on the board. f4 is again possibility, maybe also to open the position in the center of the board. So the king in the center position is here a long-term problem here for black again, although white lost the pawn. But when we watch now the activity of white's pieces, this is almost a position that black should resign. So here in the continuation, Lila C0 played at least this idea, bishop to g4, preventing white from castling. So at least white cannot build already a rook and queen battery on the d file. You can do that, but at least the king is not secured. The king would then be stuck here on in the center of the board. So even if you try f3, then again it's not so good, because bishop to h4 comes with a check, and it's now a different story. Your dark horse a little bit too weak. So that's why here in the continuation of the game, after bishop to g4, Stockfish found really a beautiful idea, bishop to h3. Here bishop to f3, played by Lila c0. Lila c0 stayed active here with the light square bishop. Really a weird position for the bishop. Here rook to g1, and now knight to g7, and here a3. We have bishop to h4, but now comes this idea, bishop to g4. We don't care so much about pawns here from white's perspective, because as we said in the beginning, we want to get rid of the knight, we want to get rid of the bishop. Now one piece is at least off the board, because now black is forced to trade off the light square bishop, because we said that the light square bishop has to control the light square here on d5. So now with the move bishop to g4, we have bishop takes g4, rook to g4. What we now want to do is get rid of the knight. So that's the only piece that bothers us. When the knight is off the board, then the knight cannot control anymore the d5 square. The bishop is of course only attacking the dark square, so the potential knight outpost on d5 couldn't be kicked away anymore by any minor piece. So although white lost the pawn here, but the position is so messed up for black. Black cannot again castle. That's the main issue. Even if you castle too early, then I think you lose again the battle on the h file. So really brilliant strategy here by Stockfish. So queen to d7, we have rook to g1, we have knight to e6, and now queenside castling. The d6 is weak, but here Stockfish after move b6 didn't want to take out the pawn on d6 immediately. Played simply here king to b1, improve the position, because the potential queen to d6 and then queen takes d6, rook takes d6 simplifies the game too much a little bit. Although white is probably slightly better here, but still you don't want to simplify the game when you have the opportunity to keep the tension in the game, when you have maybe the opportunity to stay active with your pieces. Now it's not simply time to trade off more pieces. First we improve the position, then we strike back with some tactics. So here king to f8, not a bad move here by Lila c0, because Lila c0 wants at least to secure the king on g7 without castling and staying with the rook on the h file, because we have also said that the h file attack is also one of the most important ideas here for white. So here we have knight to d5. Finally here the square is taken. We have rook to e8, rook to f1, and after king to g7, f4. f4 is cool, because here after knight to f4, bishop to f4, e takes f4, and rook to f4, mission accomplished. The knight cannot be kicked away from the square d5. We have said many times about this strategy. So you see Stockfish traded off the light square bishop for the light square bishop, and now the knight for the bishop for the knight. So you see now the knight on d5 is a much better piece than the bishop on h4. What we need to do now is of course include now all of the pieces in the attack. Of course Stockfish does it really in a brilliant way. After move bishop to d8, we have rook to f1, attacking now the f7 weakness. We have rook to f8, we have rook to g1, here a couple of perpetuals, but now queen to g3. Here we have rook to e5, now knight to e6, knight to e3, pardon me, with ideas to play knight to f5. This is now the serious threat, because let's see now if, for instance, black plays a couple of bad moves, what can actually happen. Here b5, that's really one of the worst moves that you can make here. But now, as said, knight to f5, I just wanted to show you the main threat here. Here after king to g8, then rook to h1, and you see now let's play another bad move, queen to h3. So this is something that bothers black in the continuation of the game. So this move knight to f5 cuts off here the most important connection between the rook and the square h5. So this is now a brilliant tactic tactic that white is preparing here. So after move knight to e3, here in the continuation we have rook to g5 by Lila c0. At least now the g file is protected, but in the continuation we have queen to f3, rook to h5, rook to g4, and now after king to h7, knight to f5 anyway, because if you take now here the g takes f5, then e takes f5, and whatever you do, there is simply too much tension. If you try to escape with the king, then we simply build here with f6 some kind of a setup in which we can play then afterwards rook to g7. We can also of course attack also the rook on h5. We can build a battery, and the game is simply lost here for black. So in one particular moment I think black has to even sacrifice the queen for the rook. So that's why it's not an option to take the knight. The knight has to stay here, which is really wild. You cannot open the position in front of the king anymore. Here in the continuation, bishop to f6, played by Lila c0. Lila c0 tried to get more defenders into the game. We have rook to h1. Now Stockfish gets rid of the last defender here in front of the king. We have rook to h1, queen to h1, and now king to g8 has to be played, and now queen to h6. Now there is this threat to play rook takes g6 and similar stuff, so there is now really the tension around the square g6. Here in the continuation, queen to b5 was played by Lila c0. At least a counter attack. Lila c0 is threatening checkmate. Here if you try even something else, if you try maybe to search for a path for the king to escape, maybe with the rook to d8, then rook to h4. That's also something that bothers now black in the continuation of the game, because if you take, then the bishop gets deflected from the g7 square and it's a checkmate. So you cannot protect everything, you cannot escape anymore, and in the continuation you can risk this checkmate. Let's see, you play something like, I don't know, maybe rook to e8, then you get this one, queen to h7, you have to move the king, and now queen to h8 is again a checkmate, because after bishop to h8, king to h8, the knight is controlling these two squares, the g7 square and also the e7. It would be a beautiful checkmate here by white. So really brilliant preparation. So as I said, after move queen to h6, the main threat is now the move rook to h4. So that's why black has to react. Black has to play at least some kind of a counter attack with queen to b5. But now after move queen to b5, maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the best move, because it's the only move. It's a tactical wild move, but it's the only move that helps out white. Every other move is simply bad for white, so it will be a winning game then for black. So you have to now really find the best continuation, because the serious threat is of course queen to b2, which would be of course a checkmate for black here. So take your time, pause the video, and try to see now the best continuation. So okay, I hope you could find this move, because it's a brilliant again tactic. As we said, meanwhile the g6 square is sort of a square that could be attacked here in the continuation. Stockfish simply sacrifice the rook. Brilliant tactics. Rook takes g6, f takes g6, queen to g6. You have to escape with the king, but now queen to h5 happens. You don't have any more protection. You cannot use the g7 square. You have to play only here king to g8, but now comes the problem, knight to h6. The queen is now on the same rank. Really sick, brutal tactics here by Stockfish. Now after check, we have king to g7, queen takes b5, king to h6, and now we have now an endgame in which Stockfish has a queen against the bishop and the rook, but it's a much better position because all of the pawns are weaknesses, and in the next move Stockfish will at least take one pawn. So here in the continuation, bishop to e5, Stockfish takes, queen takes a7, b5, we have queen to b6, rook to f1, king to a2, now queen takes b5. You see, it's now easy to play the endgame here in the continuation, b6, even if you take, of course, here rook takes b2, queen takes b2, bishop to b2, and now we can simply push this pass pawn and it's game over. So after move a5, we have a rook to c5, queen to b6, now simply pushing the pawn further. Here Stockfish attacks the rook escapes to e4, a7, we have a new check, but not a problem. Here Stockfish promotes to a new queen, we have rook to c7, check, a couple of more moves, and here after move queen to h8, the game was over. Stockfish won the game with this beautiful checkmate. So really great game. As I said, I think this Keres attack is sort of a directed line. Black has to react. That's, I think, what I like about the Keres attack. Let's go back. If you have trouble maybe to beat this Scheveningen systems here after knight to d4, G4 we have seen H6 after H4, bishop to E7, bishop to G2, and now if something like this happens, then you have G5. You can open the position H6 G5 and now bishop to G5. Don't take out with the pawn, although it creates a temporarily tempo, but we have seen the problems after h6 g5, then takes, and then after knight to h7, this e5 I think solves all the positional problems here for black. So that's a little bit of a theory. Of course, you have seen some different opportunities for white and for black. Brilliant tactics again in the end by the fish, and it was a beautiful win. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. If you want to see more attacking brutal games like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers, with some more games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you want to see some top chess games played by humans, by Garry Kasparov, Mikhail Tal, and many more, check out my best chess games of all time series with some brilliant games from the past. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.